You hit me like I murdered your f***ing mother or something. Relax, man. I'm only trying to give America a good show.
You knew we'd have to tackle this one eventually, so let's hold hands and get through this together. Halloween Resurrection. The two words combined are enough to send chills down the spines of even the most hardcore movie fans. It causes trick-or-treaters to cross to the other side of the street. It's the movie your parents warned you about. It's the movie where this happens.
Trick or treat, mother.
To watch it is to wonder how, as in, how did we get here? From the terrifyingly simple 1978 classic to the silly slapdash goof. Sure, it has its defenders, I think, but most of us agree that it lives near the bottom of the barrel of the Halloween franchise, and maybe of the horror genre itself. But we're completionists, and truth be told, the hows and whys of Resurrection's existence are much more interesting than the movie itself. So thanks in advance for logging into our chat room, so we can all figure out what the f happened to Halloween Resurrection.
Fear motivates. Fear gives you the feeling of being alive.
Fear makes me want to throw up.
1998's Halloween H20 was, by and large, a decent success for Dimension Films. Not to mention a fitting conclusion to the saga of Laurie Strode and her evil brother Michael Myers. With a pretty definitive conclusion that saw the beheading of the masked antagonist, it looked as though we got that rare thing in the horror world, a satisfying conclusion to a franchise. But if we're being honest, no one was naive enough to believe that it would be the very end of the shape. And thanks to the above-average box office haul for the modestly budgeted film, a return from the grave was quickly brewing for Mr. Myers. Longtime producer Mustafa Akkad was never truly going to kill off his cash cow, and had even made sure that they shot a scene during H20's production that indicated that Michael hadn't actually died at the film's conclusion. For her part, Jamie Lee Curtis was dismayed to learn another film was in the works, and wanted no part of it, but eventually agreed to appear in it if she got quickly killed off in the first act. The producer's initial idea was to have Laurie Strode commit suicide at the beginning of the film, but Curtis vetoed the idea immediately. In fact, it was allegedly her idea that the movie would open with Laurie in an asylum. And though the early scripts called for no more than a 30-second cameo from Curtis, she ended up shooting for 4 days on the picture before getting her death wish for Laurie. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. After H20, Mustafa Akkad and his producer Paul Freeman were looking for ways to keep the franchise going. Intriguingly, the guys at Dimension Films pitched the idea of a Halloween movie that didn't feature Michael Myers at all, a la Season of the Witch. Unsurprisingly, Akkad rejected that concept, as the notion of making Halloween an anthology series had long ago been seen as a mistake. H20 scribe Robert Zappia supposedly came up with a pitch that was rejected, while Halloween 6 writer Daniel Farrands had pitched an idea subtitled Lord of the Dead that would actually see Laurie revealed as the killer at the end. No dice on that one either. The producers toyed with the idea of bringing back Josh Hartnett's John Tate at one point, while also looking to bring back LL Cool J's surviving security guard character, but neither panned out. There was evidently some talk of bringing back Halloween 4 and 5 star Danielle Harris, but obviously that never came to fruition either. Enter director-screenwriter Larry Brand, who shared an agent with producer Paul Freeman. Brand had impressed Akkad with a spec script of his, prompting the Halloween Godfather to ask him for any potential ideas he might have in regards to resurrecting Michael Myers. Brand divulged a concept that he'd come up with years earlier, involving a killer stalking people in a house that has been rigged with cameras. Kind of like Big Brother with a murderer. Akkad responded positively to the concept and subsequently pitched it to Dimension. Soon enough, Brand received the green light to write the film, which would now take place not in some random hideaway, but the legendary Myers house. This new Halloween would go on to have several titles, such as Halloween: The Homecoming, H2K, Evil Never Dies, and believe it or not, Halloween, MichaelMyers.com. Oh, you gotta love the early 2000s. In any event, because the producers wanted to make it clear that Myers was returning, ultimately the subtitle Resurrection was landed upon. It would open with the revelation that Myers had put his mask on a hapless paramedic at the last minute, an idea hatched by H20's co-writer Kevin Williamson during the production of that film. After Michael successfully finds Laurie and dispatches her, he's off to Haddonfield yet again to return home, only to find that it's now the scene of a reality show where contestants roam the hallways of his one-time abode. Of course, he has no choice but to dispatch the obnoxious participants of said reality show, making this the first time in the franchise that the audience and Michael Myers are on the same page. To direct the film, the producers wanted TV director Whitney Rancic, who had turned it down, as well as Halloween 4 helmer Dwight Little, who also rejected the offer. Ultimately, the decision was made to bring aboard Rick Rosenthal, who directed Halloween 2 some 20 years earlier. Incidentally, Rosenthal's Halloween ties go deeper than that. He's also the husband of actress Nancy Stevens, who portrayed Nurse Marion Chambers in Halloween, Halloween 2, and Halloween H20, in which her character was finally killed off. Rosenthal hadn't directed much horror since Part 2, I mean if you don't count The Birds 2 that is, but he'd done plenty of television work throughout the years, and could jump back into the series with ease. He would also insert himself into the proceedings with a cameo as a professor towards the beginning of the film. Production commenced in May of 2001 in Vancouver, where a convincing replica of the Myers house was built on a soundstage, with appropriate aging and distress over 20 years. Of course, when you watch the movie, it seems like the interior of it belongs to a house about 3 times bigger than the exterior would suggest, but that's a different story.
Aren't we supposed to be looking for answers?
All right, the devil made him do it. I'm done.
Who would be playing the victims of the shape? As mentioned, the studio wanted to bring back LL Cool J since the general audience responded so well to him, but the rapper turned actor was too busy, or maybe just ready to move on. Sensing that the same quote-unquote urban audience that helped make H20 a hit would respond to another hip-hop star in a leading role, the producers set out to find their next unconventional star. Gangsta's Paradise singer Coolio was brought in to audition for the film, but ultimately they settled on New York's own Busta Rhymes, at the time one of hip-hop's most prolific entertainers. Thankfully, Busta also had some acting experience, having appeared in John Singleton's Higher Learning, as well as Shaft. Rhymes would end up improvising a great deal of his dialogue on set, bringing what you have to admit is an infectious energy to the character of Freddy. The final character, Sarah, was to be played by Australian actress Jacinda Barrett, who had a supporting role in Urban Legend's Final Cut. But before filming began, Barrett dropped out to join a TV show, so the role went to Bianca Kylik, who had already been cast as Sarah's perky best friend, Jen Danzig. After Kylik pivoted to the lead role, actress Katie Sackhoff, who'd been cast as sultry Donna, was moved over to the Jen Danzig part. An interesting tidbit about Miss Kylik: she apparently cannot scream, which is a fascinating phenomenon in its own right, but especially troublesome for the lead in a horror movie. Hence, all her screams had to be added in during post-production. Playing Michael Myers this time around was professional stuntman Brad Lorre, taking over for Chris Durand, who portrayed the shape in H20. Lorre was called by one of the people at Dimension, asking if he'd be willing to try out for Michael Myers' stunt double. Not being a big horror fan, Lorre initially thought that they meant the comedian Mike Myers, which he thought was rather odd. When it became obvious that it was the masked maniac, Lorre auditioned for Rick Rosenthal and the film's producers simply by walking in a straight line, mimicking the shape's infamous gait. Before he knew it, Lorre was told he wasn't going to just be a stunt guy, but Michael Myers himself, and he'd have to go to LA to get a head cast done for the mask. Production in Vancouver lasted approximately 5 weeks, with another week of reshoots eventually added on. As is often the case, it was apparently not easy working with the Weinstein brothers on the shoot, as they'd constantly demand rewrites and reshoots. A new ending was thought up seemingly every other day, and the production ended up shooting 4 different finales. Trying to make the best of it, Rosenthal thought that they should release all 4 versions of the film theatrically, with the audience unaware which ending they'd be getting. But that idea was obviously not very practical. One notable deleted scene involved the death of Tyra Banks' character, Nora, who is Freddy's right-hand woman. Nora's death by strangulation was filmed but later cut from the final product because it was thought that there should be a scene where a character you didn't realize was dead is discovered by the hero. Still, publicity shots released before the movie clearly show Michael Myers ready to pounce Nora from behind. Editing the film was a challenge in general. All of the cameras that the actors are seen wearing were actually recording, and the post-production team found themselves with some 20+ hours of video footage. Editing that to make it coalesce with the 35mm footage proved to be difficult. A 40-minute cut of exclusively webcam footage titled Halloween Resurrection Webcam Special can be viewed on the Blu-ray or on YouTube. And honestly, as its own mini found footage horror flick, it's not bad. It certainly beats Resurrection in terms of effectiveness. Halloween Resurrection was originally meant to be released in September of 2001, but delays pushed that date back to April 2002. Thanks to reshoots, it was pushed back further, this time to July 12th, marking the first and only time that a Halloween film would be released in July. The posters for the film prominently displayed a short-haired Jamie Lee Curtis, looking exactly like she did in H2O, but a far cry from her appearance in Resurrection. The movie got off to an adequate start, making $12 million on its opening weekend in just under 2,000 theaters, but the next weekend saw it drop over 55%. All in all, it made $30 million at the domestic box office, a less impressive number than H2O's $52 million. Its budget was reportedly around $15 million, so the film likely eked out a profit thanks to home video. But the damage to the good Myers name had been done with one swift kick from Busta Rhymes. Of course, there would be no sequel to Resurrection, it being the official end to that particular timeline in the Halloween franchise. 5 years later, Michael would get a drastically different look, thanks to Rob Zombie and his Halloween reboot. But that's a topic for a different show. In recent years, both Jamie Lee Curtis and John Carpenter have expressed, let's just say, distaste for how Resurrection turned out, with Curtis referring to it as a joke. For his part, Carpenter had this eloquent reaction to it. "Oh my God, oh Lord God, what the hell, I couldn't believe it." He speaks for plenty of us. If nothing else, then Halloween Resurrection always gives us horror fans plenty to laugh about whenever spooky season comes around. Indeed, in its own way, it's an unforgettable entry in the genre, so it will always have that going for it. And that's about as much as we can say for it. Also,
Trick or treat, motherfucker.